My name is Amber Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I used to believe that hard work was the universal language of love. I was wrong. This is the story of how I chose life over family. The night my father handed my life's work to my brother, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I stood there in my black cocktail dress, champagne glass trembling in my hand, and I smiled. Because that's what you do when 200 people are watching you get erased in real time. You smile, you nod, you pretend your chest isn't caving in. But here's what hurt more than the betrayal itself. It was the practiced delivery. My father had rehearsed those words. He looked in the mirror that morning, adjusted his tie, and practiced the exact cadence of, "Your brother will be taking over now." The same tone he used to close million-dollar deals. Confident, final, unchallengeable. 12 years! I gave him 12 years. I gave him my 20s. I gave him weekends and holidays, and the relationship that ended because I chose quarterly reports over anniversary dinners. I transformed his struggling manufacturing company from an $8 million operation bleeding money into a $100 million empire. I personally negotiated contracts that saved us during the 2020 shutdown. I hired every key executive. I designed the systems that scaled us. And in 30 seconds, in front of everyone who mattered, he made it all invisible. My brother Jake, 28 years old, charming and utterly incompetent, stood beside my father with the smile that said he'd always known this was coming. Because in our family, anatomy has always mattered more than ability. But I knew something they didn't. I knew exactly what held that company together, and I was about to stop holding it. Before we dive into how I set myself free, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below in the comments. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I was 22 when I joined Chen Industries. Fresh out of business school, idealistic, desperate to prove myself to a father who'd spent my entire childhood treating my achievements like pleasant surprises rather than inevitable outcomes. "You got into Wharton?" he'd said when I showed him my acceptance letter, genuine shock in his voice. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I didn't think you'd..." He'd caught himself, smiled, pivoted. "I'm very proud." The sentence he didn't finish haunted me for years. "I didn't think you'd make it." But I told myself that once he saw what I could do in the real world, in his world, things would be different. My first day at Chen Industries, he walked me through the factory floor. The machines were old, the processes inefficient, the morale low. The company manufactured industrial components, boring, unglamorous work that kept factories running across 3 states. We were profitable, barely, but stagnant. "This is your inheritance," he'd said, hand on my shoulder as we stood in the warehouse. "Yours and Jake's, everything I've built." I remember the weight of his hand, the warmth of it. I remember thinking, this is it. This is where I finally become real to him. Jake was still in college then, studying communications at a state school, more interested in his fraternity's social calendar than anything resembling a career path. I told myself there was time for him to figure things out. I told myself it didn't matter that Dad never walked him through the factory with that same reverent tone. I was the one who wanted to be there. That had to count for something. Those first 2 years, I worked 80-hour weeks. I started in operations, learning every process from the ground up. I worked alongside line managers, sat in on union negotiations, memorized the names of every employee in our 3 facilities. I made it my mission to understand not just what we did, but why it mattered. At night, I'd sit in my tiny apartment, the one I insisted on renting myself, refusing Dad's offer to let me stay at the family estate, and I'd make voice notes on my phone. Just observations at first. Noticed today that the 3rd shift has a 40% higher defect rate, need to investigate training protocols. But they became something else over time, a diary, a way to process the day, a record of everything I was building. My father and I would have breakfast every Tuesday morning at the diner near the plant, just the two of us. He'd order eggs over easy and black coffee, and I'd present my weekly observations. He started calling them Amber's audits. "You see things I miss," he told me once, 6 months in. "You're methodical, like your mother." It was the highest compliment he'd ever given me. By year 3, I'd identified $2.3 million in annual savings through process improvements. By year 5, I'd landed our first Fortune 500 client, a contract that would eventually grow into a $15 million annual relationship. By year 7, I'd been promoted to VP of Operations, and my father had started bringing me to board meetings. "This is my daughter," he'd say, voice full of something that sounded like pride. "She's the reason we're not bankrupt." He said it like a joke, but we both knew it wasn't. I remember one specific Tuesday breakfast, year 9. Dad was reading the Wall Street Journal, and I was reviewing contract renewals on my tablet. He looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw something soft in his expression. "You know, when you were born, everyone told me I needed a son to carry on the business," he said quietly. "I'm glad I didn't listen." I felt my throat tighten. "Dad, I mean it, Amber. You're everything this company needs. Smart, dedicated, respected. You've earned every bit of this." I held on to those words for years. They became my anchor. When I missed my best friend's wedding because of a client emergency, when the man I loved gave me an ultimatum, him or the company, and I chose the company. When I looked in the mirror at 33 and saw gray hair and permanent exhaustion. "You've earned every bit of this." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. Jake graduated college that year. He moved to Austin, told everyone he was exploring entrepreneurship, which apparently meant day drinking and attending music festivals funded by Dad's credit card. He'd call me sometimes, usually when he needed something. "Hey sis, can you talk to Dad? He's threatening to cut me off." "Jake, you haven't had a job in 2 years. I'm networking, building relationships. Not all of us want to be corporate drones." I'd smooth things over for Dad, every time, because that's what big sisters do. We protect, we enable, we make excuses. I never once considered that I was protecting the person who would replace me. The shift started so subtly, I almost missed it. Jake moved back to Seattle in January, 11 months before the party. He showed up at the family estate for Sunday dinner with a new girlfriend, an Instagram influencer with 200K followers, and announced he was ready to get serious about the family business. My mother practically glowed. "Oh, Richard, isn't that wonderful? Both our children working together." Dad looked at Jake with an expression I'd never seen him direct at my brother before. Consideration. "You really mean it this time?" "I do," Jake said, and for once he sounded sincere. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy, about what really matters. I want to learn from you, Dad, and from Amber, of course." Of course. The addition felt like an afterthought. "Well," said Dad slowly, "we could use someone in business development, client relations. Amber's been stretched thin." I wasn't stretched thin. I was running a $100 million operation with a team I'd personally built. But I smiled. "It would be great to have you, Jake." He started the following Monday. Dad gave him an office on the executive floor, down the hall from mine, same size, same view. For someone with 0 business experience, it felt disproportionate, but I told myself to be generous. Everyone has to start somewhere. Except Jake didn't start anywhere. He showed up at 10 a.m., left by 4, and spent most of his time taking clients to expensive lunches that yielded no results. But he looked good doing it. Charming, confident, everything a CEO's son should be. At board meetings, he started offering opinions, empty ones mostly, dressed up in business jargon he'd clearly Googled. "We should leverage synergies in the vertical integration space," he'd say, and Dad would nod thoughtfully, as if Jake had said something profound rather than nothing at all. I'd present quarterly results, revenue up 18%, client retention at 94%, 2 new Fortune 500 contracts signed, and Dad would say, "Excellent work, Amber, very thorough." Thorough, like I was a diligent student rather than the architect of our success. But Jake would suggest we explore cryptocurrency integration or pivot toward influencer marketing, and Dad would lean back in his chair considering. Interesting perspective, son. Fresh eyes. The Tuesday breakfasts became less frequent. Dad started canceling, citing conflicts with meetings I knew weren't on his calendar. When we did meet, he'd spend half the time on his phone. "Sorry, sweetheart, Jake's trying to close this new client in Portland. I'm helping him strategize." The client didn't close. None of Jake's clients ever did. But Dad kept coaching him, kept giving him chances, kept talking about his potential. My mother started dropping comments at family dinners. "Amber, honey, you work too much. Don't you want a family? Jake's girlfriend is lovely. They might get engaged soon." "I'm focused on the company right now, Mom." "But the company isn't everything. Jake understands balance. He knows how to enjoy life." Jake, who'd contributed nothing but expense reports and half-baked ideas, apparently understood something I didn't. 6 months in, Dad called me into his office. "Amber, I want to talk about succession planning." Finally, I thought, finally, we're making this official. "I'm bringing in a consulting firm to evaluate leadership potential across the executive team, including you and Jake." "You're evaluating me?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "It's standard practice, objective assessment. We need to make sure whoever takes over has the right temperament." Temperament? You know what I mean. Leadership isn't just about competence, Amber. It's about vision, inspiration. People need to want to follow you. People did follow me. The entire operations team reported to me. I had a 96% retention rate among my direct reports. But I didn't say that. I just nodded. The consultants came. They interviewed everyone. They shadowed me for a week, observing how I ran meetings, negotiated contracts, solved problems. They spent 2 days with Jake, watching him take long lunches and give presentations with slides I suspected his assistant had made. I never saw their report, but 2 weeks later, Dad started talking about new directions and the next generation of leadership in ways that made my stomach twist. At the last Tuesday breakfast we ever had, I asked him directly, "Dad, am I going to run this company one day?" He looked uncomfortable. "Amber, you're invaluable, you know that. But running a company, it's different from managing operations. It requires a certain what?" He didn't finish the sentence. He just paid the check and said we should get back to the office. I should have known then, but hope is a stubborn thing. The party was scheduled for a Friday in November, Chen Industries' 40th anniversary. Dad had rented the ballroom at the Four Seasons downtown. 200 guests. Employees, clients, board members, family friends, business partners, reporters from the industry press. I'd helped plan it, reviewed the catering menu, approved the invitation list, coordinated with our PR team. It was supposed to be a celebration of everything we'd built, everything I'd built. I wore a black Armani dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Simple, elegant, powerful. My mother had offered to loan me jewelry. "Something more feminine, dear." But I'd declined. I wanted to look like myself, professional, competent, ready. The ballroom was beautiful. String lights, white orchids, a subtle ice sculpture of our company logo. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Everyone was smiling, laughing, celebrating. Dad took the stage at 8 p.m. He looked distinguished in his navy suit, the microphone making his voice boom across the room. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 40 years ago, I started Chen Industries with nothing but a dream and $50,000 in loans. I never imagined we'd become what we are today." He went through the company's history, the early struggles, the first major client, the expansion into new markets. He thanked the employees, the board, the clients. He mentioned my mother's support through the lean years. Then he paused, and his expression shifted, became serious, important. But tonight isn't just about celebrating the past. It's about securing our future. And that future requires leadership, vision, the courage to take this company into the next 40 years. My heart started pounding. This was it. This was the moment he'd tell everyone what I already knew, that I'd earned this, that the company was mine. His eyes found me in the crowd. I smiled, ready to walk up when he called my name. As many of you know, my daughter Amber has been instrumental in our recent success. Polite applause. I felt my face flush. She's dedicated, hardworking, and has a brilliant operational mind. We wouldn't be here without her contributions. Contributions? Like I was a helpful assistant rather than the architect of our transformation. But as I think about the future, I'm reminded that great companies need more than efficiency. They need vision, charisma, the ability to inspire not just our employees, but our clients, our partners, our industry. No, no, no. My son Jake has shown me that vision. He understands that business is about relationships, about connections, about thinking beyond spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Jake, standing near the stage, looked down modestly, practiced humility. So tonight, I'm proud to announce that Jake will be taking over as CEO of Chen Industries, effective January 1st. The room erupted in applause, but I heard it through water, through fog. The sound was distant, distorted. Dad was still talking. Amber will continue as Chief Operating Officer, of course. Her expertise is invaluable. But Jake will lead us forward into this exciting new chapter. He looked at me then, directly at me, and he smiled, that same smile I'd seen him use in boardrooms when he'd just closed a deal. Confident, final, unchallengeable. Amber, sweetheart, come up here. Let's show everyone the team that's going to take Chen Industries into the future. I was supposed to walk up there, shake my brother's hand, smile for the cameras, play my part in the narrative Dad had written without consulting me. My feet moved. I don't remember deciding to walk, but suddenly I was on that stage, the lights bright and hot on my face, Jake's arm around my shoulders in a brotherly embrace that felt like a cage. "Congratulations," I heard myself say. My voice sounded normal, stable. The cameras flashed. Everyone was smiling. My mother was crying happy tears. The board members were nodding approvingly. Our biggest client, Helen Zhang, stood near the back with an unreadable expression. Jake leaned in, whispered so only I could hear. "Don't look so devastated, sis. You'll still have a job." That's when I felt it, the crack. Not in my composure, that held, but in something deeper, the foundational belief I'd built my entire adult life on, that hard work mattered, that competence was rewarded, that if you proved yourself indispensable, you'd be valued. I'd been wrong about everything. We posed for photos. I smiled until my face hurt. I accepted congratulations from people who wouldn't meet my eyes. I drank champagne that tasted like ash. And the whole time I was making calculations, taking inventory, remembering every contract I'd negotiated, every relationship I'd built, every system I'd designed. They'd just handed my life's work to someone who couldn't read a balance sheet. I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they'd lost. I'm going to stop here for a second. If this story is resonating with you at all, or if you've ever felt the pain of being misunderstood by the people who are supposed to love you most, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It really lets me know that sharing these hard stories is worth it. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? How did you rebuild trust? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let me tell you what happened next. I left the party at 10 p.m. Didn't say goodbye, just slipped out through the side entrance and drove to my apartment in silence. In my living room, sparse and minimal because I'd never had time to decorate properly, I poured a glass of wine I didn't drink and sat on my couch in the dark. My phone was buzzing with messages. I ignored them all except one. Trish, my father's executive assistant, and one of the few people at the company I genuinely trusted, had sent a text. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to warn you, but he swore me to secrecy. Call me when you're ready." So she'd known. They'd all known. This hadn't been a spontaneous decision. It had been planned, choreographed. My public humiliation had been scheduled into someone's calendar. I didn't cry. I sat there, still in my Armani dress, and I felt something cold and clear settle into my chest. Not rage. Rage is hot and impulsive. This was different. This was calculation. I opened my phone and started recording a voice note. Friday, November 15th, 10:47 p.m. Today, I learned that 12 years of work can be erased in 30 seconds. Today, I learned that my father sees me as a supporting character in Jake's story. Today, I learned that everything I believed about merit and fairness was a fairy tale I told myself to justify the sacrifices. I paused, took a breath. But I also learned something else. I learned that they have no idea what actually holds this company together, and they're about to find out. The next morning, I showed up to the office at 7 a.m. as usual. I worked through the weekend as usual. Monday morning, I walked into the executive briefing with my reports prepared, my demeanor professional, my composure intact. Jake stumbled in 15 minutes late, coffee in hand, apologizing with a charming smile. "Sorry, everyone. Crazy weekend celebrating." "No problem, Jake," Dad said warmly. "Amber, why don't you bring the new CEO up to speed on current operations?" I spent 2 hours walking Jake through everything. Client relationships, active contracts, production schedules, financial projections. He nodded along, taking notes on an iPad, asking questions that revealed he understood almost nothing. "So, when you say supply chain optimization, what exactly does that mean?" I explained, patiently, thoroughly, like I was training someone competent. Because that was my strategy. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. Me in a supporting role, Jake in the leadership position. I was going to document every single decision, every failure, every gap in his knowledge. And I was going to let him fail spectacularly. Tuesday morning, I called David Park, the corporate attorney who'd helped structure my equity agreements years ago. We met at a coffee shop 20 minutes from the office. "I need to understand my options," I told him, "legally, financially, strategically." David, a silver-haired man in his 50s who'd watched me build Chen Industries from the inside, didn't waste time with sympathy. "Your equity agreement gives you 15% ownership earned through sweat equity. That's yours no matter what. But the operational control, that's the leverage point." Explain. "You personally manage relationships with clients representing $40 million in annual revenue. You designed the proprietary systems we use for production scheduling, quality control, inventory management. You hired every key executive in the past 5 years. All of those contracts, all of that institutional knowledge, it's tied to you, not to the company. So what happens when I'm no longer there? Legally, they can try to enforce your non-compete clause, but your contracts with clients like Helen Zhang include termination options if key personnel change. And your employment agreement, which I wrote, allows for exit with cause if there's a material change in your role or responsibilities. Being passed over for CEO in favor of my unqualified brother counts? In most courts, yes, especially since they're keeping you as COO but putting someone else in charge. That's technically a demotion in terms of trajectory. I felt the first spark of something that wasn't despair. So, I have options? Amber, you have more than options. You have leverage. The question is, what do you want to do with it? I thought about that for a long time. What did I want? I wanted them to know what they'd lost. I wanted them to understand that respect can't be demanded, it has to be earned. I wanted to build something that proved I didn't need their validation. But more than anything, I wanted them to fail without me, to watch the empire I'd built crumble under Jake's incompetence, while I walked away with my head high. I want a clean exit, I told David, with my equity paid out at fair market value and no non-compete restrictions, and I want to do it in a way that makes it clear this was their choice, not mine. He smiled. Then let's get to work. The next 6 months were the most strategic of my life. I maintained perfect professionalism. I showed up early, stayed late, answered every question Jake had with patience. I was the model second in command, supportive, thorough, seemingly content in my diminished role. But I was also documenting everything. Every decision Jake made without consulting operations. Every client meeting he bombed because he didn't understand our products. Every promise he made that couldn't be kept. Every strategy he proposed that contradicted basic business fundamentals. Trish became my invaluable ally. She'd been with the company for 20 years, and she'd watched my father build it from nothing. She'd also watched me transform it into something remarkable. Her loyalty wasn't to the CEO position, it was to the company itself. "He's in over his head," she told me quietly one afternoon after Jake had failed to show up for a critical board presentation. "Everyone can see it except your father." But Dad was seeing what he wanted to see, his son finally taking leadership seriously. The fact that Jake was leading them off a cliff didn't register. Not yet. Marcus Rodriguez, the CFO I'd hired 3 years ago, started having off-the-record conversations with me. "The Q1 projections Jake approved are fantasy," Marcus said. "He promised clients pricing we can't sustain. He's making commitments without checking with production. If this continues, we'll be in serious trouble by Q3. "Have you told Richard?" "I've tried. He says Jake is learning and needs space to grow into the role, but we don't have time for that kind of learning curve." I didn't offer solutions. I just listened, because the moment I stepped in to save them, I'd prove I was indispensable, and they'd take advantage of that forever. 3 months in, Helen Zhang called me directly. "Amber, I need to be honest with you. Your brother came to our strategy session last week completely unprepared. He didn't know basic details about our contract. He pitched us on services we never asked for, and you don't actually provide." "I apologize, Helen. He's still learning the business." "That's my point. I'm not paying your company to educate your father's son. Our contract is up for renewal in 4 months. If you're not the primary point of contact, I'm taking my business elsewhere." Helen Zhang's contract was worth $15 million annually. Losing it would be catastrophic. I made a note of the conversation, added it to the documentation. By month 4, even the board was getting nervous. At the quarterly meeting, one of our outside directors asked Jake directly, "Can you walk us through the strategy for the Patterson account?" Jake faltered, tried to bullshit his way through, failed spectacularly. I watched my father's face during that meeting, watched the first cracks in his confidence appear. He'd bet everything on Jake, and Jake was failing. Afterward, Dad pulled me aside. "Amber, I need you to help your brother more." "I'm helping him, Dad. I give him everything he asks for." "I mean, really help him, guide him. You know the business better than anyone." I looked at my father, really looked at him, at the desperation in his eyes, the realization that maybe, just maybe, he'd made a catastrophic error. "Dad, I've been trying to hand this company to you for 12 years. You chose to give it to someone else. This is what you wanted. I'm just respecting your decision." It was the most honest I'd been with him since the party. His face went pale. "Amber, I'm tired, Dad. I'm going to take some vacation days, sort some things out." I took 2 weeks off, the first real vacation I'd had in 12 years. And during those 2 weeks, I met with investors. I talked to former employees who'd left Chen Industries over the years. I researched our competitors. I identified gaps in the market. And I designed something better. A new company, smaller, leaner, more innovative, everything Chen Industries could have been if ego hadn't gotten in the way. I called it Ascent Manufacturing, and I started recruiting. Marcus was first. "I'll give my notice next week," he said immediately. "I've been waiting for you to do this." Then our head of business development. Then 3 senior operations managers. Then key salespeople who'd built relationships under my leadership. People weren't leaving Chen Industries for better pay. They were leaving because they believed in me, because they'd seen what I could build, because competence, in the end, attracts competence. I wasn't stealing employees. I was just giving them a choice. Stay with a company being led into the ground by nepotism, or help me build something that valued merit. By the end of month 5, the exodus was undeniable, and that's when I scheduled a meeting with the board. The boardroom felt different that morning. The same mahogany table, the same leather chairs, the same view of downtown Seattle, but the energy had shifted. I'd requested a special session. Just me, the board, and David Park, who attended as my legal counsel. Jake wasn't invited. Neither was my father, technically. He'd recused himself from the vote, though he sat in the back of the room, jaw tight. I stood at the head of the table, a leather portfolio in front of me, and I spoke with the same calm competence I'd always brought to these meetings. "Thank you for making time today. I'll be brief and direct." I opened the portfolio and distributed packets to each board member. Detailed, documented, irrefutable. These documents outline Chen Industries' operational and financial decline over the past 6 months. Revenue projections down 22%. Client satisfaction scores down 31%. Employee attrition up 40%, with most exits coming from senior operational staff. I let them absorb the numbers. Our largest client, Helen Zhang, has informed me she will not renew her $15 million annual contract unless there are significant changes in leadership and operational structure. 2 other major clients have expressed similar concerns. We're looking at a potential $27 million loss in annual recurring revenue. Margaret Whitmore, our lead independent director, spoke first. "Amber, we're aware things have been challenging, but transitions take time." "You're right, transitions do take time, but we're not in transition, we're in freefall, and I'm here today to offer you a choice." I took a breath. This was it. "I'm formally requesting that the board buy out my 15% equity stake at fair market value, approximately $20 million, based on current company valuation. I'm also requesting immediate release from my non-compete agreement and a mutually agreed-upon transition plan that protects the company's interests." "You're leaving?" My father's voice came from the back, sharp with shock. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the board. "I've built a career at Chen Industries that I'm proud of, but I'm no longer in a position to do my job effectively. The current leadership structure prevents me from making decisions that are in the company's best interest, and I refuse to watch 12 years of work be destroyed by incompetence." "That's not fair," Dad said. "Jake is learning." "Richard, please." Margaret held up a hand, silencing him. She looked at me with something like respect. "What happens if we say no?"
This was the leverage point, the moment David and I had prepared for.
then I'll remain as COO per my employment contract. But the clients who've built relationships with me over the past 12 years will make their own decisions. Helen Zhang has already indicated she'll exit. Others will follow. Key employees will continue to leave. They're already receiving offers from competitors. And frankly, I'll stay exactly where I am, diminished, sidelined, and unable to prevent what's coming. I paused. Or you could let me go with dignity, pay me fairly for what I've built, and implement a leadership structure that might actually save this company. David leaned forward. My client has also prepared an alternative proposal. If the board reinstates Amber as CEO and moves Jake to a role that better suits his skills, business development, client relations, she's willing to stay and work alongside him. But she requires actual authority and board support. I added quietly, I love this company. I built this company. I don't want it to fail, but I won't sacrifice myself to prop up someone who isn't willing to do the work. The room was silent. I could hear my father breathing heavily in the back row. Margaret looked at the numbers, then at her fellow board members. We need to discuss this privately. Amber, David, Richard, please give us 30 minutes. We stepped into the hallway. My father followed us. Amber, you can't do this. I'm not doing anything, Dad. I'm responding to what you did. You made a choice 6 months ago. You chose Jake. You chose tradition over competence. You chose what you wanted to believe over what was true. He's my son. So am I. My voice cracked for the first time. So am I, Dad, and you made me invisible. You took everything I built, and you handed it to someone who doesn't understand its value. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd stay. I thought you'd prop him up, save him, sacrifice myself to protect your legacy. I shook my head. I'm done sacrificing. 35 minutes later, Margaret called us back in. The board has voted, she said formally. We accept your terms, Amber. We'll buy out your equity at $20 million, release you from your non-compete, and work with you on a 3-month transition plan. I felt my knees weaken. Relief, grief, victory, loss. Everything at once. However, Margaret continued, we're also implementing significant changes. Jake will move to a business development role under Marcus's supervision. We're hiring an external CEO with turnaround experience. And we're asking you to stay on as an advisor during the search. Compensated, of course. She looked at me steadily. You built something remarkable here, Amber. We failed you. We'd like a chance to make it right. I accepted the board's offer. Stayed on for 3 months as an advisor, helped them hire Catherine Morrison, a brilliant CEO who'd scaled 2 manufacturing companies and had 0 tolerance for nepotism. Catherine's first move was to restructure everything. Jake kept his title but lost all operational authority. Marcus became COO. The company stabilized. Helen Zhang renewed her contract. Not for me, but because she respected Catherine's competence. I could have felt vindicated. In a way, I did. But mostly, I felt tired. My $20 million buyout came through in February. After taxes, I had about $12 million. Enough to fund Ascent Manufacturing, invest in the team I was building, and finally breathe. The first thing I did was take a real vacation. 2 weeks in Japan. No laptop, no phone calls, no voice notes about productivity and strategy. I walked through Kyoto temples, ate ramen from tiny street vendors, sat in tea houses and watched rain fall on stone gardens. And for the first time in 12 years, I thought about who I was outside of Chen Industries. Amber Chen. Not Richard Chen's daughter. Not the COO who saved the company, just me. I cried a lot on that trip, in hotel rooms, on bullet trains, sitting on a bench overlooking the ocean. 12 years of grief I'd been too busy to process. The loss wasn't just the company, it was the relationship with my father I'd thought I was building. the fantasy that hard work would earn his unconditional love. I called my therapist from Tokyo, started weekly sessions, learned vocabulary for things I'd experienced but never named: conditional worth, achievement-based identity, patriarchal devaluation. I started understanding that my father's choice wasn't really about me. It was about his own limitations, his inability to see past tradition, his need to believe that Jake's maleness made him naturally suited for leadership, regardless of evidence. I couldn't fix that. I couldn't make my father see me clearly. The only thing I could control was how I moved forward. Ascent Manufacturing launched in May, small but strategic. We specialized in precision components for aerospace and medical devices, higher margin, more innovative than Chen Industries' traditional market. My team was lean: Marcus as CFO, 8 former Chen employees in key roles, and 15 new hires who'd never worked with me before but believed in what we were building. Our first client was a medical device startup. Our second was an aerospace contractor looking for a more agile supplier. By month 3, we had $4 million in contracts. By month 6, $8 million. We weren't competing with Chen Industries directly. We were doing what they could have done if they'd been willing to innovate. I ran the company differently than I'd run operations at Chen Industries. 9-to-5 workdays, mandatory vacation, mental health benefits, profit sharing for every employee. "You're building the company you wish you'd had," Marcus observed one afternoon. He was right. I also started doing things I'd neglected for 12 years. I joined a women's business leadership group, started painting, badly but joyfully, dated someone who worked in academia and had no idea what a supply chain was, saw my friends, called my best friend and apologized for missing her wedding all those years ago. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said, "but I'm glad you finally forgave yourself." Had I? I wasn't sure, but I was trying. My relationship with my family was complicated. My mother called occasionally, always starting with, "When are you going to stop being stubborn and come home for Sunday dinner?" I stopped answering those calls. My father reached out once, a text message 6 months after I left. "I'm proud of what you're building." Too little, too late, but still something. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I would, but I wasn't ready to forgive the unforgivable just because he'd finally noticed my absence. Jake, surprisingly, sent me a LinkedIn message after a year. "Hey sis, I know things ended badly, but I'm learning a lot in my new role. Catherine is tough but fair. I think I'm finally understanding what you tried to teach me. No hard feelings?" I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to write back, "No hard feelings? You took my life's work and almost destroyed it. You let Dad use you as a weapon against me. You smiled while I was erased." But the truth was, Jake was a pawn. Dad had used him just as much as he'd used me, just differently. Jake was the golden child who could never escape the expectation of being golden. I was the workhorse who could never stop proving her worth. We were both casualties of the same system. I wrote back, "Focus on being good at your job, Jake. That's all any of us can do." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was peace. Or the beginning of it. 2 years later, Ascent Manufacturing has 28 employees and $18 million in annual revenue. We're profitable, growing, building something sustainable. Chen Industries stabilized under Catherine's leadership. They're not the rocket ship they were when I was there, but they're solid, respectable. Jake is apparently doing well in business development. Turns out he's good at relationships when he's not expected to understand operations. My father and I spoke recently. A phone call. Awkward but civil. "Your company is impressive," he said. "You always were the smart one." "I was the hard-working one," I corrected gently. "Intelligence alone doesn't build anything." There was a long pause. Then, "I made mistakes, Amber. With you. With the company. With what I prioritized." It wasn't an apology, not quite, But it was acknowledgement, and that was something. I know, Dad. Could we maybe have breakfast sometime, like we used to? I thought about those Tuesday mornings, the eggs over easy and black coffee, the father I'd wanted him to be versus the father he was. Maybe, I said, but not yet. I need more time. I understand. Did he? I wasn't sure, but I meant what I'd said. Maybe someday, when I was strong enough to love him without needing him to see me, when I could accept what he could offer without resenting what he couldn't. Here's what I've learned. Betrayal doesn't kill you. What kills you is betraying yourself, trying to earn the love of people who can't give it. My father couldn't give me unconditional love. He could give me conditional approval based on how well I served his vision of what his children should be, and that was never going to be enough for me. So I stopped trying to earn something that wasn't available, and I started building something that was mine. Revenge isn't destruction. Revenge is proving them wrong by building better, by being happy, by refusing to let their limitations define your capacity. I didn't burn Chen Industries down. I just stopped holding it up. And then I built something that didn't need to be held. It could stand on its own. That's not just revenge. That's freedom. And freedom, it turns out, was what I wanted all along. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? What's one thing you learned about yourself after a betrayal? Share one moment in your healing journey that changed everything. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters, your healing matters, and you're not alone. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next story. This was another story from Revenge Room, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. If Amber's journey resonated with you, please don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next transformation.